The International Atheist Alliance is pleased to present Dr. Stephen Morris, guest speaker at an Atheists United open meeting. Subject of Dr. Morris' presentation was the meaning of life. John Nelson, co-president of Atheists United, introduced Dr. Morris.
This is our monthly meeting at the Marina of Atheists United. My name is John Nelson. For those of you that don't know me, I'm co-president of this illustrious organization, and Ken Bonnell is my other co-president right here, our other co-president. We are a nonprofit educational organization with the purposes of maintaining the constitutional separation between religion and government, and also of promoting atheism. So scientists who openly declare their atheism are unfortunately a very rare breed. We have one with us today. He's going to be our featured speaker. Stephen Morris is one of those rare individuals who possesses the courage and the integrity necessary to swim against the religious current in the scientific community. But he's even more than this, because he also knows the Bible. That is a rarity. Most of the atheist scientists that I know of just won't have anything to do with the Bible. But Stephen Morris knows the darn book, and this is extremely useful for him and also for us in our community. This is very rare. He's also a great friend of Atheists United, and the fact that we have 26 new pamphlets is due to his efforts in formatting them for us, and he's also written 3 more, which we'll be talking about at our next publications committee. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Stephen Morris.
As soon as we say that there is some cosmic plan for all of us, we are immediately faced with the fact that there is a great deal of tragedy and evil in the world. If there is a benevolent, omnipotent deity, there should be no evil. And this is the central piece of nonsense that plagues all religions. One way out of that is to say, evil? There is no evil. Oh, there's little bits of evil, but anything that looks bad isn't really bad. It's part of a larger good. For example, Alexander Pope, in his poem Essay on Man, says the following: all nature is but art, unknown to thee. All chance, direction, which thou canst not see. All discord, harmony not understood. All partial evil, universal good. I suggest you go to a hospital where someone's dying in agony and recite that poem to him and see what he thinks of it. Despite the fact that this seems so laughable when brought out in the open, it is very, very agreeable to people who need some kind of larger purpose in their lives. And the idea that the existence of a God gives automatic meaning to what we do is extremely tempting. A view of atheism is found to be horrifying for a great number of people. For example, the polar explorer Fridtjof Nansen was in a discussion about the meaning of life with one of his friends, and this is what his friend has to say about this. Talking to Nansen was a prospect to daunt the boldest, for even among his countrymen, Nansen was a distant and intimidating figure. A friend of Nansen described how once they were discussing the meaning of life. Nansen said, "Life has no meaning. There is nothing called meaning in nature. Meaning is a purely human concept which we put into existence," unquote. And then the friend says, "It was like a chill blast from another mental world." And indeed, that is how people who are comfortable with the religious concept of meaning very often respond to a more atheistic, non-purposeful view of the universe. Certainly, when we look at the Bible, we see it dripping with a sense of purpose. In the Old Testament, story after story tells the Israelites that they were God's chosen people. Well, now, that doesn't give you a sense of immediate meaning and purpose, that you, of all other people, were chosen for something. Then there's no sense in even discussing the concept of purpose. In the New Testament, we are told that an entire God actually died for your sins. Now, of course, the notion that anybody, well, for one thing, by the look of you, I don't think any of you have committed any sins worth somebody else dying over. You look pretty innocent to me. Maybe that's because you're atheists and you don't do these kind of sins. The illogic of the notion that even if you were dripping with sin, some human or God dying about it 20 centuries ago before you'd even had a chance to commit any of the sins doesn't seem very realistic. Nonetheless, it does imbue any Christian with an immediate sense of self-importance and worth and value, that their God died for what they did. You are immediately a VIP under those conditions. Now, modern science and technology has allowed us, at least the atheists in this room, to abandon this demon-haunted world, as Carl Sagan recently called it. And we do not find this need for religion. But many other people do, and it is one of the central mysteries to atheists. Why would intelligent people, and so many Christians that you meet are very intelligent, they're not a bunch of dummies, why do they still believe, especially when modern science and technology allows us to abandon the ignorance and foolishness of the past? Well, one of the reasons is that modern science and technology, while giving us a gift of real understanding about the reality around us, has also deprived us as much of the comfort that religion can bestow. For example, in ancient times, farmers literally lived by or reaped the fruits of the sweat of their brow. A farmer would plant the seeds, and later on he would reap the reward. There was a direct connection between the value of his life and what he saw in front of him. We don't do that nowadays. When we work hard and spend our time trying to live our lives, what do we get in return? We get green pieces of paper. That's what we get. We don't get a direct result from our labor. Centuries ago, the average person never traveled much more than 20 miles from where he or she was born because modern transportation did not exist. Even horses were very expensive and not available to most people. The result was that people led very insular lives that gave them the feeling that they and their community were central to the universe because they never saw anybody else. Thanks to television, we are now aware that there are literally billions of other people in the world, and we are but one tiny fragment of humanity. What's worse, those other people have languages and customs that make our language and customs but one of many. Many scientific discoveries have dethroned us from our central place in the scheme of things. For example, Copernicus and his heliocentric view of the universe, that the Earth is not the center of the universe, was fought by religions for the obvious reason that, of course, the Earth is the center of the universe because we're here, and that makes it the center of the universe. Modern science has taught us that our planet is but a fairly ordinary planet circling around a very ordinary sun, one of billions of stars in our galaxy, which is but one of billions of galaxies in the universe. If you didn't feel like dirt walking into this lecture, now you do, because you're just such a tiny, insignificant, meaningless piece of... Of course, atheists do not think of humans as insignificant, but certainly this view of a huge cosmic universe is in some ways rather disheartening. Modern science has also shown us that disease is not caused by having little devils with pitchforks inside you, prodding you and giving you a feeling of pain. Instead, it is caused by such things as bacteria and cancers. This old notion of disease as being caused by demons and devils within us, however frightening that must have been, nonetheless showed us that the cosmic supernatural forces cared enough about us at least to torment us. Modern science, on the other hand, tells us that when you feel the pangs of disease, it is because some tiny little stupid microbe is using you as a kind of supermarket. Humans go blind to feed the appetite of a bacterium, and that is a very disgusting and disheartening picture compared to this idea that cosmic forces are in pursuit of us. However horrible that may be, it made us important, and scientific reality has now denied us that. Science is merely true, but it does not try to be a comfort. Perhaps the most fundamental discovery of modern science that makes the Christian's skin crawl is the theory of evolution by Charles Darwin. Now, the most obvious reason why religionists might be upset with this is because it contradicts the first and second chapter of the book of Genesis. I often feel that the reason they get so upset about this is that that's the only part of the Bible they get to read before they get all tired with those vows and these and the genealogies, and they just give up on the whole thing. So that's the one story they know of because they don't read anything else in the Bible when they try to read it from the start going forward. But there's more to Darwin's theory that can upset a Christian than merely the fact that it contradicts the story of Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. The genius of Charles Darwin was to recognize that just as Newton was able to show that the planets go around in their orbits and have that cosmic permanence in their behavior, not because orbits of planets are railway tracks that the planets are riding along or crystal spheres that are rotating, the planets behave the way they do generation after generation because at every instant of time they feel a force towards the sun due to gravity that draws them inwards around their motion. In just the same way, the evolution of life and this incredible complexity and diversity of life we see around us did not come about by some cosmic plan, but because life forms, second by second, try to survive and reproduce. And those two behaviors of life are all that is necessary to explain why life changes from one generation to another until finally we see new species. Darwin's picture of evolution was philosophically dramatic because it showed that evolution itself had no purpose. It had no direction. Evolution happens because of the nature of genetics and the environment in which life finds itself, but there is no cosmic plan unfolding as life slowly changes. This fact is very often not realized by people who understand the theory of evolution. For example, in a recent newspaper article in which it was discovered that early forms of humans had not continued to evolve in a straightforward way, but very often stayed very much the same way they were for almost 1 million years, is written about in a sense of disparagement, that our ancient ancestors didn't quite cut the mustard in the fact they delayed progress while trying to evolve towards us. This is what the San Francisco Examiner had to say about these discoveries about early human fossils. Quote, "The skull strengthens scientists' belief that Lucy fossil was part of a species that puttered around Ethiopia, evolving very little over at least 900,000 years," unquote. The sense of disparagement that our ancestors were just messing around in Ethiopia for generations before they finally got with the program and started doing what they were supposed to do, that is, evolving towards us, is clear in the attitude that this author takes. But these ancient ancestors of ours were doing exactly what they were supposed to do. They were surviving and they were reproducing. They were not meant to evolve towards us. That happened, but it wasn't what they were planning on doing when they were over in Ethiopia almost 1 million years ago. Even scientists very often express the opinion that evolution is directed towards us, especially scientists who cannot get over their attachment to Christianity. For example, 2 years before the infamous monkey trial, the Scopes trial in Tennessee, a group of conservative scientists got together and published the following letter. It is a sublime conception of God which is furnished by science, and one wholly consonant with the highest ideals of religion, when it represents him as revealing himself through countless ages in the development of the earth as an abode for man. Women are in there somewhere, presumably. As an adobe for man, and in the age-long inbreathing of life into its constituent matter, culminating in man with his spiritual nature and all his godlike power. But that is not what we see in the fossil record. We do not see life trying to evolve towards us. Even in our charts of evolution, we find very subtly expressed evidence that we are the whole point of what's going on. Now, you've all seen this kind of chart, haven't you? This is a chart of the evolution of life on Earth, starting with something very primitive and going this way and that way, but culminating in none other than Homo sapiens. That's us up here. Now, at that, the Smithsonian did a better job than most other charts that you see. Normally, humans are right at the crown up here, with everything heading up towards this highest peak, which is us. Even more startling, it shows a woman up here instead of a man, which I suppose you're supposed to see in these evolution things, because that's what you normally see. She's very carefully posed, so you don't see anything naughty. But even so, even in this, which is better than most charts, what do we see? Front and center, right at the top, mammals, right up here. And we very often refer to this age of life as the age of mammals, but that's not true. This is the same age as it has been for the age of reptiles and the age of amphibians. It is the age of arthropods. Insects, lobsters, and all the rest are the largest in terms of diversity, disparity, number of species, and biomass. The insects rule the world. The only thing that puts us front and center is that we're the ones who get to create the charts. Thank you. Now, this notion that evolution is heading towards us is part of a larger concept that developed about 2 centuries ago called natural theology. About 2 centuries ago, the Bible had been translated into the vernacular languages for enough time that most people realized that the Bible, filled with absurdities and atrocities, could not be considered an accurate reflection of the mind of God. Having abandoned the Bible as being the route to knowledge of religion, many people suggested that instead we turn to the world of nature, that the great book of nature would tell us about the meaning of life and God's plan for us, assuming that he exists. She. Darn, I keep making that mistake. Oh, she exists, of course. Pray to God, she'll help you. That's what the suffragists said, and they were right. The idea of looking at nature to determine the mind of God immediately runs into a problem in that nature is red and tooth and claw, to quote the famous phrase, and that the world of nature does not show very much in the way of morality. That if you say that nature tells us about God, it is clearly not a beneficent God. It is a God willing to see creatures starving and in agony as they try to survive. Not all the time, of course, but all too often we see tragedy in nature. Animals feed off of each other, and disease culls everything in the end. Well, what they said was, okay, you're looking at the bad parts of nature, but you're looking at a level much too detailed, much too far down. Raise your sights, and you will see the universal good that God really intended. Oh yes, the lion kills the lamb, and the lamb screams its life out. Don't look at that. Look at the larger picture to see this wonderful mind of God. Well, the trouble with that is you look at the higher level of this, and it's just as bad. As Darwin himself wrote in describing this dilemma, I own that I cannot see as plainly as others do, and as I should wish to do, evidence of design and beneficence on all sides of us. I cannot persuade myself that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created the Ichneumonidae, a type of wasp, with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars, or that a cat should play with mice. When we raise our sights and look at the behavior of species, we find that their behavior is very often atrocious in any moral terms that we would want to assign to any deity. Darwin had mentioned this Ichneumonidae wasp. What this wasp does is it lays its eggs inside of caterpillars which it has paralyzed but not killed. The caterpillar, conscious as any caterpillar can be of pain, must slowly die as these eggs hatch and gradually eat the caterpillar from the inside out, using it for food that is preserved alive. Not that I have a great deal of sympathy for caterpillars, but as an expression of the divine mind, you think that a deity would have figured out how to keep these wasps going with dead caterpillars instead of living ones. In fact, the world of insects provides us with some pretty horrible stories. That story, at least you could say, well, it's one species feeding off of another species. That was caused by the fall of man in some obscure way. But before then, the wasps weren't quite that vicious. But we can see even within species terrible behavior if we try to judge it, incorrectly in my view, in terms of human morality. For example, it was recently discovered that a tiny mite, M-I-T-E, called Acherophonax tribalae, we scientists like to do things in Latin or Greek because English would be something available to everyone, has the following cycle of life. A pregnant mite contains but one male and about 7 to 10 females inside it, inside the pregnant female mite. That male mite begins life by impregnating his sisters and then dying. Okay, maybe not so bad so far, for the male at least. It just consists of sex, you know, that's, from a male point of view, that's not so bad. But from the female point of view, you're supposed to laugh. I didn't make a joke, okay. I'll hold up my hands when I want you to laugh at my jokes. From the female point of view, these pregnant mites reach the outside world not by being born, but by simply chewing their way out of their mother, who then dies. Many people think that the dinosaurs ruled the earth for 100 million years, then right at the end, mammals showed up, and of course us superior mammals managed to wipe out the dinosaurs. In fact, mammals show up just a little later than the dinosaurs in the fossil record and spend 100 million years being dominated by the dinosaurs and not showing any movement towards intelligence. We now believe, although all the evidence isn't completely in, that the dinosaurs ended their rule on Earth because the Earth was struck by an enormous meteor or comet 65 million years ago that created a global winter that cooled off the planet for a couple of years, killed off most of the plants, and the dinosaurs starved and froze to death in the ecological disaster of this enormous explosion and the planet-wide cooling that followed it. There's nothing so random as being struck by a meteorite. If that meteorite had been delayed a couple of minutes and missed the Earth might still be dominated by dinosaurs, just as dumb as they were 65 million years ago. We do not see anything in the fossil record heading towards complexity or heading towards intelligence. In fact, very often forms of life will evolve towards simpler structures. Parasites, for example, like tapeworms, have lost a lot of the organs and features, such as eyes, that allowed them a long time ago to live as separate species and not as parasites. Evolution can move towards the simpler as well as the complex. Evolution is not, in some cosmic way, directed towards complexity or directed towards us. Why did humans develop the ability to think a couple of million years ago? We don't know. We know very little about how the human mind actually works, and our ability to think and to talk may be some quirk of the development of humans that originated for reasons completely different than the striving towards intelligence.
The meaning of life? Like the song says, atheists manage to live without answers to everything. Realization of this project was made possible by a generous grant from the James Hervey Johnson Charitable Educational Trust. This program was produced by the Atheists United TV project team. Your comments and suggestions regarding our programming and inquiries regarding Atheists United are cordially invited. Write to Atheists United, Post Office Box 57435, Sherman Oaks, California, zip 91413, or call area code 818-785-1743. We invite you to contact any of the Atheist Alliance societies which are listed on your screen by consulting the phone book in their area.